What's up, Packer fans? Welcome back to the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. We are officially 1 week away until Packers football, Packers Vikings. I cannot wait. It was so great seeing a full slate of college football action yesterday. Certainly enjoyed those games, and it is going to be NFL season, kickoff on Thursday, and just everything is going to get in the swing of things, and I could not be more pumped up about it. But before we get there, we've got a couple things that I still want to go over before we start breaking down Packers Vikings and all that throughout the course of the week. So first of all, make sure you're subscribed if you're not already. But let's go over a couple roster maneuvers first. First of all, yesterday or 2 days ago, there were technically a couple maneuvers. I didn't have the opportunity to discuss it yesterday on my show because I had recorded the episode prior to the news coming out. So a couple quick notes. Micah Abernathy officially on the practice squad for the Packers. He did clear waivers, so he is officially back. They also gave him a new number, which isn't number 46, which immediately makes him ridiculously better. So that is good news there. 34 is the number, by the way. Unfortunately, I guess how you want to look at it, but Rico Gafford is out. They released him from the practice squad. So it was a really interesting experiment, a very unique experiment. At the beginning of camp, it looked like Green Bay had, I don't think unearthed like this, like potential really good corner or anything like that, but it looked like they had maybe unearthed a really unique and interesting, like number 6 defensive back, like number 47 or 48 active guy on game day. It just looked like maybe he was going to be like an emergency corner, a gunner, maybe a kick returner, special teams guy, kick coverage. And then, maybe even be like an emergency wide receiver, have a package where they could use just his 4.2 speed in. Like, it just looked like maybe he was going to have this unique versatility on this team and just be able to do enough to maybe earn a roster spot. That said, from that point on, from basically mini camps, OTAs, and beginning of mini camps, beginning of training camp, there was maybe some signs. And then after that, his technique as a corner was just, way too off. And as a special teamer, he just didn't provide that much value to sort of make up for everything else. And if you're going to keep 7 wide receivers and Juwan Winfrey on your practice squad, there's really not much need for an emergency wide receiver on the roster anyway. So everything just sort of got undercut, and it never made sense for him to make the roster. I did still think he was a unique player to keep on the practice squad, but he was probably just too far away at this stage in his career from being a corner or, a valuable 53-man roster player. So they decided to move on from Rico Gafford, again, Micah Abernathy in. However, that still left one spot open. And there was sort of this like Ramiz Ahmed was initially reported that he was going to be on the team, and the Packers mentioned it, but then they announced their initial batch of 12, and then they signed 3 more, and then they were reportedly signing another, and there just was never any news about Ramiz Ahmed. Well, Bill Huber has reported once again that Ramiz Ahmed is set to join the Packers practice squad still. So still nothing official, but it looks like he will be added to the roster, to the practice squad sooner rather than later, and will take up that final 16th practice squad spot. So keep an eye out for that in the next couple days, but he should be the player that takes that final spot. All right, let's talk about our main topic for today, and that is the topic that nobody really wants to discuss, and that's injuries. And I think if everyone had their way, right? Everyone would take the Madden slider. You go in, you go to the lower right and you hit the little gear thing and you go into settings and you go and you scroll down to injuries and you just turn them off. You just turn them off for the entirety of the year, and everyone on every team gets to stay healthy, and we actually get to see who legitimately has the best talent and the best team, not which team can just survive the injuries the best. Because a lot of times, especially with a longer season now, a longer regular season, and just with the physicality of the game today, there are going to be serious injuries throughout the course of the year that will alter and change the course of your football team. And I've mentioned this on numerous occasions in the past. There's going to be some team, probably 2 or 3, that just get snake bitten to death, to the point where there's no way you could compete. Like if you're going to take away a starting quarterback and a starting left tackle and an edge rusher, an inside linebacker, a starting corner and a safety and a kick returner and, a couple backups, like you just had no chance, before the season even started. You were just snake bit, and there's nothing that you can do about it. So the first thing you have to do is avoid being that team. Because if you're that team that just has all of your key players go down, next year's the year. Like you just have to start playing for next year, basically, because there's not much you can do in that situation if that's your team. If you're the team that gets all the injuries, it just is what it is. You just have to hope that that's not your team. The second thing is that every week is basically like a game of football roulette. And how I put this each week, and I've talked about this on numerous occasions in the past as well, is there are 2 games every week. There is the game that you actually play, and if you won, lost, or tied the game. And then there's the game of what did it cost you? Because there are going to be players that got hurt in that game. So who were they? And what was the extent of the injury? And how long are they going to be out for? And when they return, what percentage of the player are they actually going to be? Because it's one thing to return, but if you're 40% of the player that you were prior to the injury, I don't know, is it even really that great that you're back in the first place? So those are all the things that kind of go into it of like, man, these injuries will pile up, and you just have to see who is it, how long are they out, and at what capacity are they actually going to be at when they re-enter the game at some point, maybe weeks down the line. So those are the 2 games, and those are the things that I'm always keeping an eye on. And sometimes there are games where you're just like, you know what, I don't even care about the win or loss. Just get out of the freaking game healthy. There's times where that's legitimately the case because you're trying to play for the playoffs and you need your core guys healthy. So there are losses on weeks where the Packers have won by 20, 30 points and they lost the week because they've lost a major player and it's just going to be too big of a blow, at some point to overcome. So I call it football roulette, injury roulette, whatever you want to call it, because at the end of the season, there's probably going to be somewhere between about 7 and 15 players that are on IR at the end of the year. And if you look at this Packers 53-man roster right now, I would say about 1 out of every 10 of those players at the end of the year will probably be on IR at best. Like it could very well be more than that, but at least 1 out of every 5 or 1 out of every 10 will probably be on IR. So the question becomes, who is it and can you overcome it? So Gil Martin for CheeseheadTV.com recently wrote an article of who are the 6 Packers that you absolutely cannot lose to injury. And I will give the names of his players, but I recommend going out and reading the article to see who not who he selected, but why he selected each player. He had a great breakdown on each of these. So again, go check out the article. CheeseheadTV.com. Gil Martin wrote, again, the 6 players that the Packers cannot lose this season. His 6 in order: Jair Alexander, number 6, Bakhtiari and Jenkins, 5/4, Savage and Amos, 3/2, and Aaron Rodgers, clearly number 1. So again, go check out his article and he will define all of his reasons why, and it's definitely worth checking out. But I wanted to go over the players that I thought personally were the players that you absolutely cannot lose. And these are the players that when you're looking at the injury roulette wheel, you're just saying, okay, avoid these guys, avoid these guys, avoid these guys. Anyone else we could probably maybe get by with, but these are the guys that you just can't lose for the season and have not be available come playoff time. So here are my 6. 1, clearly goes without saying, agree with Gil Martin here, agree with everyone. This is going to be Aaron Rodgers, right? I know Jordan Love's taking a jump. I know that he looks like maybe he could win a couple games in the NFL now. If you lose the MVP of the league, the guy that's making a ridiculous salary cap figure, rightfully so, like you're just not going to recover from that. It's over. You wait till next year and you hope for something better and better results. And if, assuming Aaron Rodgers is actually back after that injury, who knows? But that would be the clearly catastrophic one that there's just no coming back from. Your season's over. Good night. Good luck. And just hope that the Vikings and every other, Bears and every other team that you hate don't win the Super Bowl. Hope that some team you kind of are okay with wins it, and that, the rest of the NFC North still looks awful, and that the Packers can bounce back a season from now. That it just is what it is. And that goes basically, if Brady goes out, they're screwed. And if we could go team by team, right? But like if most teams starting quarterbacks go out, they're screwed. It was why it was so impressive when, just going back to that Eagles Super Bowl, man, think of Carson Wentz now, of how great of a season he had, MVP caliber season. and then they lose him. And it's so, again, now so weird even to think of that Carson Wentz being that good back then, but he was, and just, I don't know, injuries and everything else happened, and his career totally got derailed. But then he gets hurt, and Nick freaking Foles comes in and wins the Super Bowl, just with Doug Peterson, who gets fired a couple years later for, because that team is so, like, that Super Bowl team, one of the more odd, bizarre, crazy situations and scenarios. But I digress. If Rodgers goes out, you're screwed, I guess, unless Doug Peterson's your coach and Nick Foles is your backup quarterback, in which case you can be totally fine somehow, some way. But number 1, Rodgers. Number 2, number 3, I agree, same names here, but different spots. Gil had them 5 and 4. I have them 2 and 3, is Bakhtiari and Jenkins. And I said it yesterday. I've said it before. I just don't think if this offensive line if they're not healthy, I don't think they can get the ultimate job done of winning a Super Bowl. I just don't. I think they are going to need Bakhtiari, Runyon, Myers, and Jenkins, those 4 at least, to be healthy. And maybe you can get by without Myers. Maybe you can get by without, John Runyon Jr. Maybe Zach Tom could step up. Maybe Jake Hansen could step up. Royce Newman could play better. Like, I think there's some scenarios where you could still be a good offensive line, especially with Bakhtiari and Jenkins in there. But you start losing those guys, and it just becomes so much harder. And we've seen it the last 2 years really play out. 2 years ago against Tampa, I don't think the game changes enough where the Packers beat the Bucs if Bakhtiari's there, but it's a much better chance. I'll say that right now. Losing him was a huge blow, and their pass rush was dominant against Green Bay in that game. So it certainly would have helped Green Bay to have Bakhtiari. And then, last year, right, there's the questionable tackle move, which I've defended, but it's still certainly within the realm of question and fair to question it. But no Bakhtiari, no Elton Jenkins. It's just so hard to overcome. And we saw against a good, playoff caliber defense in San Francisco, without your key offensive lineman, things got really, really tough. And especially in conditions and, where throwing's going to be tough, you got to be able to run the ball. They just didn't have the run blocking. They didn't have the pass protection. It looked bad. And that's, again, you need your top guys along the offensive line come playoff time. So number 2 and number 3, put them in whatever order you want. I'm going Bakhtiari and Jenkins. And of course, not ideal, right? Because both players right now are already hurt coming off of injury, and you don't know when they're going to return. So not exactly what you want to see for those two going into a season, but I still have to put them number 2 and number 3 on my list. Number 4 is the first name that I'm going to add on that Gil did not have, and that's Rashaan Gary. I like Preston Smith on one side. I think this defensive line is going to be much improved, but Rashaan Gary's their pressure player. He's the guy that you need to get consistent pressure, sacks, force the quarterback to get rid of the football. He's their one true, force player game changer in that front 7. Kenny Clark, who I'm going to talk about in just a second, spoiler. Kenny Clark is great, but he's not that incredible disruptor that's just getting in the backfield immediately and causing immediate pressure. That's just not his game, right? And Preston's going to have some pressures from time to time, but it's not always the most consistent. And you're not expecting Dean Lowry, Jerron Reed, TJ Slayton, those, Devontae Wyatt as a rookie to be like these huge pressure players. That's just not who they are for the most part, right? So all of it together can work well, but the engine here is Rashaan Gary. And you can miss him for a few games and I think be okay. But A, the fact that he is the guy as the pressure player, and then B, the fact that your backups at that position are Enigbare, Tipa, and Garvin, it's just not good enough to have, that's going from an A to a D, or an A plus to maybe even a D minus at edge rusher. That's a massive, massive change. So Rashaan Gary definitely, and you could even put him higher and I would have no argument against it, but he's number 4 on my list. Number 5 is Kenny Clark. And I just think people easily forget this defense is at its best when Kenny Clark is at his best. And I know that this defense is a lot different and the defensive line depth is a lot better, but when Kenny Clark is playing on his A game and clogging everything up in the middle, it just makes everything else so much easier for everyone else. And I think the fact that he can get pressure from the inside and really reset that line of scrimmage, bull rush his offensive, the guards and the centers back into the quarterback. Now it makes Gary's job easier. It makes Preston's job easier. It makes the linebackers' jobs easier behind Clark when he's playing well. when Clark is playing great, this defense is usually also playing great. And I just think he is so key to this defense and what they want to do. And while I think their depth is better than it has been in a really long time, there's still no Kenny Clark on that defensive line besides Kenny Clark. And I think that would be a major loss. And then 6, I'm going to do the exact same number that Gil had. I'm going to go Jaire Alexander here at number 6 as well. I do think, if you said there's no Jaire Alexander, you could make an argument that there's the potential of Stokes, Douglas, Nixon, Savage, and Amos still being, a top 10 defensive backfield in the NFL? Those 5 as a nickel? I think that could be still a very good, defensive group, that they still have a lot of talent back there. So there's no Jaire Alexander, and you need a Jaire Alexander in the playoffs, in my opinion. And I think, not having him at 100% really, hurt last year. But if he can be healthy, man, he has the ability to lock up the Justin Jeffersons. And maybe lock up isn't exactly the right word. Just Jefferson's going to get some of his as well. But they lost that game to the Vikings last year because they couldn't stop Jefferson. Even with Douglas and Stokes and a good defensive backfield, they couldn't stop Justin Jefferson. That changes a lot with Jaire Alexander. In fact, I would go as far to say if Jaire Alexander plays Minnesota in Minnesota last year, Green Bay doesn't lose that game. Jefferson's not going off for that many yards against Jaire, and Jaire would match up with him almost the entirety of the day, right? So number 6 for me has to be Jaire Alexander. Savage and Amos, not quite on my list. I think there's some options. Rasul Douglas moving back to safety, and I think they can get by. I watched the Packers win a Super Bowl with Charlie Pepper. No disrespect to Charlie Pepper, but Nick Collins, clearly, a phenomenal safety on one spot, but Charlie Pepper at the other. I think if they can at least get one of those guys, keep one of those guys healthy, I think they can mix and match and find some ways to make it work, especially with how good the rest of this defense is. So I wouldn't put Savage and Amos up there. Amos is close, certainly. He means so much to this defense and his consistency, but I can't put him quite in that top 6 at this point. So Gil's 6, just to recap, 6 was Jaire, 5 and 4 were Bakhtiari and Jenkins, 3 and 2 were Savage and Amos, number 1 was Rodgers. My group, 6 was Jaire, 5 was Kenny, 4 was Gary, 2 and 3 Jenkins and Bakhtiari, and then 1 was Aaron Rodgers. That is going to do it for me today. Always appreciate you joining me. Hoping that you are enjoying your long weekend and your holiday weekend. I'll be right back here tomorrow with an all-new episode, but until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.